Lamar Jackson is the embodiment, the personification of a couple of things. Number one is just how inexact of a science the NFL draft can be, as you're talking about a guy who was the 32nd overall pick in the 2018 draft. He was the fifth quarterback drafted that year. Sam Darnold was taken 29 spots ahead of him. Baker Mayfield was taken number 1 overall. Josh Rosen was taken at 10. And Lamar Jackson was taken at 32. Yet he's the one that won the MVP award in 2019, set a single-season quarterback rushing record. That year he had 36 touchdown passes as well. Has a 45-16 career record as a starter. Led the Ravens to the playoffs multiple times over 5 seasons. You look at Lamar and you say, wow. Yeah, some of those other teams look really stupid now. Bill Polian talking about you should try another position. Looks stupid now. So points to just how inexact of a science the NFL draft can be, and also, frankly, how stupid NFL teams are. Let's call it as we see it, because a lot of them are. So there are probably a lot of people, fans, media, and understandably so, that may be a bit surprised that the Ravens, having Lamar Jackson in the fold, were unable to come to terms on a long-term contract extension, leading to him, getting to the end of his rookie contract, and the Ravens placing the non-exclusive franchise tag on him. And I could certainly understand some of the surprise with that. And we're also hearing very quickly, like as soon as the Ravens put that non-exclusive franchise tag on Lamar, which I thought was really interesting, you see reports of several teams giving an indication of how they're not interested and they're not going after Lamar Jackson, which is leading to a lot of statements, a lot of opinions, a lot of thoughts, and a lot of questions as to why that would be. I thought it was an interesting enough topic to come on here and do a video, but really take a deep look at some of those reasons why, and not get caught up in being too reactionary as a lot of the internet and social media tends to be, and really try to have an intellectual look at this, because it is really important. First, for all these teams coming out with reports, and those reports aren't coming out of thin air, you look at it and you say, oh, maybe it's just because they don't like the way Lamar Jackson looks, if you get my drift, and they're not that interested in him, and that's why. And as much as you could point to the NFL and still say they have some concerning things when it comes to race, specifically when you look at coaching, most notably the head coaching position and the lack of diversity throughout the league, I don't think the teams are showing no interest in Lamar because he's black. How many times would you have a 2-time Pro Bowl, former league MVP, come available on the market in his mid-20s and teams aren't interested? I think you're barking up the wrong tree here, respectfully, personally. You talk about a league that's about to have 3 black quarterbacks go in the top 10, potentially even the top 4 or 5. You're also talking about a league where you just saw Kyler Murray get massively overpaid, not to mention all the stuff with Deshaun Watson, all the off-the-field stuff, and yet Cleveland gave him a shit ton in draft pick capital to bring him in, and they gave him a 100% fully guaranteed contract. I don't know that Lamar Jackson should be thought of as this epitome of the problems of the NFL. Feels like you're barking up the wrong tree, in my opinion. Now, I will say, the Ravens putting the non-exclusive tag on Lamar is telling. It's either, to me, A, they're not entirely sold on Lamar being worth that big of a contract, maybe having some concerns about his durability, maybe some concerns about his leadership or approach. It could be that they're just tired of negotiating with Lamar since he doesn't have an agent. Certainly a possibility. It could also be that the Ravens are looking for other teams to negotiate with Lamar and let them worry about all the negotiations, and then let Lamar come back with whatever deal he finds, and the Ravens can make a decision to ultimately match it or not. It could be any combination or all of those things. But it is very interesting. Because I don't give a shit. If you were that absolutely sold and convinced that Lamar is the guy, you would never even put that out there as a possibility. Could you imagine if the Chiefs had ever let Patrick Mahomes get to the free agent market? They're putting the exclusive tag on him. The Bengals with Joe Burrow. The Chargers with Justin Herbert. It is telling somewhat that the Ravens would put the non-exclusive tag on Lamar. Think about what that means. They are allowing other teams the ability to negotiate with their free agent quarterback. That means something. It can mean a number of things, right? And I've just laid out a couple of them. When you talk about why are teams not interested in Lamar Jackson and being so vocal and quick to come out with that, there could be a lot of reasons. It could be one that other teams look at this and say, we don't want to get into a bidding war, so if a bunch of us start saying that we're not interested, it might lower the price. As unrealistic as it might seem, it's a possibility. Again, we're talking about the NFL. We're talking about NFL teams. They're not all rocket scientists. I'm just saying. A big piece of this could be other teams are wary of paying a huge contract to Lamar Jackson and also the price of 2 first-round picks that it would require to be able to acquire him, with the Ravens putting that non-exclusive franchise tag on him. And when you look at some recent precedent, Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson, those deals so far have not been great for the teams that acquire those quarterbacks. So when you look at it from a recent lens, there could be some legit concerns for some of these other teams saying, hey, Deshaun Watson, that hasn't worked out so well so far for Cleveland. Russell Wilson trade for Denver was a freaking disaster. They're also looking at this and saying, Lamar Jackson's also never made every start in a season. So do we want to really plunk down that much money for that long and give up 2 first-round picks for a guy who might not make every start and more than likely won't make every start? It's easy from the outside looking in when it's not your money, it's not your career on the line to say, yeah, you got to do that. But if you were in that spot and you were in the spot of some of these general managers, it would give you some pause, some real serious pause. And if you didn't, that would suggest that you're a dumb dick that's derelict in their duties. Also, I could envision other teams having real questions about whether Lamar's play style is a type of game that really translates to winning championships. And all of the evidence indicates that it doesn't. Quarterbacks with Lamar's run-heavy style just don't win Super Bowls even now. You can point to Russell Wilson a decade ago with the Seahawks, but that was based off of the defense of Marshawn Lynch more than anything else. And then you also talk about you're investing that much money and giving up that much of draft pick capital to acquire Lamar Jackson. You want a guy that's money and clutch. And Lamar's history in the playoffs is not mid, it's less than mid. I'm a Lamar Jackson fan. Y'all know this going back to the draft. I had a first-round grade on the guy. But you got to be realistic about the scenario and the player that we're talking about here. He stunk in the playoffs. It also could be that teams look at Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens and they don't want to be a negotiating tactic. They look at them and they say, we don't think the Ravens are actually going to let Lamar go, so why the hell would we really bother? There certainly could be something to that. They could also look at this and say, hey, we don't want to make an offer and have to keep all this cap space aside in case the deal actually did get consummated to our benefit. But meanwhile, the Ravens take a couple of days, then they freaking match it, and then we're screwed. Again, makes sense. They don't want to have their hopes get up just for it to be a waste. I'm sure some of these teams look at this and say, hey, there is a bit of a piece here around, do we really want to get in the business of giving fully guaranteed contracts and trying to nip some of the Deshaun Watson stuff straight in the bud? Deshaun got a 100% guaranteed contract. Teams having some pause about wanting to get into that business in the long term, especially with Lamar Jackson. Fair or not, it is understandable. And I have no question that that's at least some of the conversation, whether we like it or not. But beyond all of that other stuff, and I think some of a number of those factors I've outlined are why some of these other teams are so quick to come out and say that they're not interested. And for different teams, it could be different scenarios. It could be different things. It could also just be that NFL teams are really, really stupid. I referenced it earlier, hence why Lamar Jackson was the 32nd overall pick in 2018 and not a top 10 or top 5 pick. But Josh fucking Rosen was a top 10 pick. Sam Darnold was a top 3 pick. Sometimes it's important to remember just how stupid these teams are. Do you look at the Raiders, the Falcons, the Titans, and the Commanders and say that these are smart, well-run football teams? No, you fucking don't. I am 100% with you if you talk about the Commanders. Oh, we're going to go into the season with Sam Howell as QB1. Are you really? Are you really that stupid? Because if you believed in him that goddamn much, you wouldn't have waited until the last game of the season to play him. You wouldn't have went back to Carson Wentz after you gave up on Taylor Heineke, who you had put in because you didn't buy into Carson Wentz that you gave up a bunch to trade for. Like, the Commanders should be all over this shit. The Titans should be all over this shit. The Falcons, the Raiders. You say maybe not the Panthers now because they traded up to go get a young quarterback. The reality is that some of these NFL teams are just fucking dumb. And there's no other rationale you could come up with. Certainly some of those other factors I called out come into play, but they are just the types of things that really dumb organizations would think about and use as an excuse to not go try to better their team and get a big-time starting quarterback. Lamar has his flaws. He certainly does. But he's got some great things in his corner. And he can do some dynamic things. And the fact that these teams will sit there and say, nah, we'll pass, shows why these teams, in some cases, are not to be taken seriously and aren't going any fucking where. Because they are stupid. And that's what it comes down to here. Beyond anything else, some of these NFL teams that aren't interested in Lamar aren't interested in him because they're just fucking stupid. Period.